the COVID restrictions and the fact that we are now hearing, Professor, that these restrictions may go as soon as 10 days from England.
Yeah, thanks, Arlene. I was just listening to your debate. Fascinating. I think it's interesting to note within about 4 weeks how the debate has radically changed. If you go back to about a month ago, we were having the new SAGE advice and the advisory modelling saying we should go into further restrictions, and the government railed against that. And what's happened here is in that month, we've seen infections go up to very high as they do at this time of year. But what we've also seen is them come off naturally as viruses do. And I think what's happening now is we're seeing a complete shift in the debate. And with that, as people's fear and anxiety come off, what's happening is they're looking back in time. I get the thing about the parties. It's a moral outrage that comes with that. But the key is, in my lifetime, I never thought I'd sit in a position where somebody could say you can't go to the birth of your children, or you can't go to the death of parents. That was completely, wholly wrong policies to have. And many of the policies and restrictions we've had have come from a small group of people. I think there are some words you could look to, immaturity as opposed to empathy. I just think these people are not mature in their decision making and therefore not mature in the policies that they've said. One of your guests mentioned about the beliefs. It comes down to risk perception. At what point, where do you think you are within COVID affecting you? How concerned are you? How anxious are you? And that defines the policies you will support or make. And as we've got to this point now, people are looking back, for instance, like the masks in school, and very clearly saying, where's the evidence? Well, actually, there is no high quality evidence. So if you're going to intervene with a policy for millions of children, we need legislation that says there's clearly the benefits outweigh the harms. And that's not the case. And that's why you've now got a challenge to the government saying if you carry on intervene, we're going to take this to legal proceedings because many of these interventions haven't worked. And now we're starting to question that. And this debate is what we now need to have.
Carl, I was always very puzzled that the government said it was following the science, as though there was such a thing as the science. That it didn't seem to recognise it had a broader responsibility to balance the science against other considerations in society, like keeping the economy going and people's mental health and so on, that it didn't establish another committee or maybe set of committees that represented those other aspects, the non-health aspects, so that politicians could take a balanced view of their decision-making. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, it did surprise me. And I think if you go back to the whole of 2020, we remember the debate was about suppression and zero COVID. And as we came out of measures, it took an awful long time to come out of measures. May, June, July, before we actually got back to some normality, despite the data being very clear and dropping. What you're alluding to is one single measure of healthcare, COVID, has dominated the debate for the last 2 years, despite rising problems in other areas of healthcare, the economy, social care, care homes, all of these features, particularly mental health. And look at the devastation now we've got to pick up with our children, education. Remembering about half of all mental health problems become apparent by about the age of 14. So if you're going to decide to intervene at that point, you better be pretty clear you've got good information in the room. Now, I think in 2021, we got a lot of things wrong. And one of the major things we've got wrong is failing to understand that the NHS has to prepare for winter surges in the Northern Hemisphere from acute respiratory pathogens. It needs about 20% extra capacity and a flexible approach to how to move staff around so we don't end up in a crisis like the petrol station problem where we're suddenly saying people can't get in the hospital and we're going to have to lock down again. We should be now having a debate saying the NHS cannot be used to set policy from this point on in the future. What do we have to prepare for? And if you look at the numbers, it's quite simple. It's about 20% extra beds at this time of year. Remember, in acute respiratory pathogens lead to increases every single year around December and January.
Listen, Carl, we could talk about this all day, but thank you so much for joining us.